Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Krown Countdown U. My name's Ryan Sullivan, his name's Andrew Wadden. As always, we have got a great show lined up for you. OUA playoffs underway, AUS playoffs underway, and a pretty good looking game going on down in Montreal.
25-game winning streak on the line.
Streaking? We talking about streaking?
No.
Finally, we're talking about streaking.
Ryan, we're not getting back into that. The CIS has never witnessed a team as dominant as the Laval Rouge et Or. The Red Machine over the last 2 years have been crushing their opponents. They're back-to-back Vanier Cup champs and came into this past weekend with a CIS record, like I was saying, 25-game winning streak. Back in week 1 of the season, the Montreal Carabins were taken to the woodshed by the Rouge et Or, losing by 27. Now, despite that loss coming weeks ago, you can bet it still remained fresh in their minds. The Carabins took to their home field over this past weekend to not only kill the Rouge et Or's winning streak, but to reap revenge on a team that consistently had their number.
Off to Montreal we go. Literally kicking things off from the opening whistle, Boris Bidet, who scores more Rouges than anyone in the CIS, scores another right here as Montreal decides to concede the single. Laval takes an early 1-0 lead. Midway through the queue, Carabins pivot Gabriel Cousineau fires over the middle. Philippe Anchille makes an incredible grab. Check out the concentration on this one. That put MTL in the red zone. But on 3rd and 1, instead of taking a chip shot field goal, the Carabins go for it, but the Rouge et Or put up the wall. They're jacked up. Huge stop for the visitors. Shift to the second, Laval marching, but Hugo Richard pass gets read by J.S. Blanc, the big man with the soft hands, but Montreal does nothing with it. Minutes later, Richard pulls off a beauty fake, fools most of the Carabins front line, takes it into Montreal territory, but Laval only manage a Rouge out of it. They head to the poutine break up 4-0. Third Q, the score now 7-3 Laval. Richard gets pressured by a blitzing pack of Carabins, coughs up the biscuit. Montreal recovers. They get it down to the Laval goal line, where Cousineau fights his way into the bluegrass. The extra point was good, and the Carabins take their first lead. Over to the fourth. Cousineau gives the ball off to Mikhail Davidson with the end around. The Madden football favorite play works well for the boys in gray. Plus, Laval gets called for a face mask. That leads to this chip shot gimme of a field goal. MTL's lead grows to 4. Under 5 minutes to go now. On 3rd and 10, Richard gets sacked by a Carabins defense that was in the freshman's grill all game long. The Rouge et Or's 25-game winning streak is over. Montreal takes it 13-9. This one was won, as they say, in the trenches, as the Carabins D sacked Richard 3 times, picking him once, while also forcing that fumble. The freshman slinger managed just 138 yards of passing on the day, while not passing for a touchdown for the first time in his short CIS career. Here's the rest of the story from around the RSAQ. And here's your Dunsmore Cup semifinal matchups.
Well, with all the talk of X potentially folding up shop, for the next few seasons, this playoff game was absolutely massive for the sustainability of the program. Much like Andrew Wadden following a trip back home from the Roxy, the X-Men would have to make every second count. X-Men, welcome to Antigonish, Nova Scotia. Smack that flag, there you go. Thompson Richards starts things out early, hits Bobby Troop, and he rumbles it down to the 1-yard line, a big hit there. The white and red would then put the first points on the board. It's Eli Prock now from a yard out, and it's 11-6 Acadia. Now 17-8 Axemen in the dying minutes. Devon Cook finds Randy Roseway deep. He then finds Donald Tabor, who dives ahead. Nice effort there. It's a 1-score game. X sets up now for the onside kick, and Randy Roseway again tips it out of bounds. His team has a shot in the final minute. Cook then buys some time, looks around, and finds who else? Randy Roseway for a nice chunk of change as he heads out of bounds, stops that clock, then from 36 yards out, it's up to Jeremy Ford for the win. He puts it up, he splits the pipes, X moves on. They win 18-17. An insane finish. Randy Roseway definitely gets the unsung hero nod in this one. Speaking of honorable mentions, though, Acadia's Brett Backman led all defensive players with 7 solos and 1 assisted tackle. X moves on and will face the undefeated and statistically speaking best team in the country in terms of win-loss records, the Mount Allison Mounties, this weekend in your Loney Bowl AUS final.
All right, playoff time in the OUA. Ottawa took to the road in Windsor looking to bounce back from a 39-29 loss earlier in the year by the hands of the Lancers. But we're not going to start there. Let's start in London, Ontario, where the hometown Western Mustangs came into this Yates Cup quarterfinal against Laurier without their best weapon on offense. Quarterback Will Finch out with a concussion, replaced by backup Stevenson Bone, who dismantled the Golden Hawks, putting up 61 points just 3 weeks ago. But this is the postseason and not the regular season. Could the third-year slinger lead the heavily favored Purple Ponies to a victory? Well, let's head to TD Stadium and find out.
So off to London, Ontario we go. It was a windy one at TD Stadium. Greg Marshall hoping Bone can lead his troops to a W, but it didn't start well for the backup pivot as the G-Hawks D gets the pick, and it leads to this major from Dylan Campbell, which would be the only major of the half. Move to the third Q, Laurier up 10-7. Campbell coughs up the pigskin. The Purple Ponies pounce on it, which leads to this 29-yard field goal from Zach Medeiros, the first of 4 he'd boot on the day. Fourth Q, Western up 18-10. G-Hawks pivot James Fracas gets picked by Jordan Beaulieu. That leads to this 2-yard scamper from Yannick Carew, which was the first and only touchdown the Purple Ponies would score in the game. But it was enough. Western takes down the G-Hawks and advances to the Yates Cup semis. Medeiros was the man for Western in this one, connecting on 4 of 5 field goals, including a 49-yarder. Western will hit the road to face Guelph next.
The GGs visiting Windsor. First Q already 2-0 Lancers when Derek Wendell finds Mitchell Baines from 10 out, make it 7-2. 17-9 now in the second quarter when Wendell sets back, airs one out, and hits Ian Stewart, who climbs the ladder for a gorgeous grab. 46-29 your final. The GGs march on. It's only been a few weeks since Ottawa left McMaster with a 38-18 win. They are now going to head back to Mac to try and leave Hamilton with their third upset in as many weeks. All right, here are your playoff matchups. This weekend in the OUA, as mentioned, Ottawa heads to McMaster to take on a very strong Marauder squad this Saturday, while Western heads to Guelph to take on the red-hot Guelph Griffins that enter this game riding a 7-game winning streak. September 15th, 2007. That's the last time the Manitoba Bisons beat the Calgary Dinos. Now, without their starting quarterback, do you really think the Bisons have a shot at turning that tide? Well, if I were a betting man, I wouldn't invest in the team that calls investors home. Bisons hosting the Dinos. Teo Dizar getting another start in place for the injured Jordan Yant. Calgary punting, and it's blocked. Johnny Marks still gets a leg on it, but it goes right to Jaden McCoy. The real McCoy then takes it 60 yards all the way to the painted fake grass touchdown. Bisons, they go up 14-5 late in the first. Dizar then from 75 yards throws a perfect, and again I emphasize perfect, pass to Nick Dembski. He will do the rest, put it on the board for the hometown herd. Andrew Bucholtz's trend of impressive ground games continues. He fakes this handoff and goes 15 yards to the house. It cuts the lead to 22-13. Dizar right back the other way hits Zach Riegert on the screen. He picks up a nice chunk of change, and it would lead to this Keenan LaFrance capping off the drive. The Manitoba Bisons beat the Calgary Dinos 50-31. In his fill-in role, Teo Dizar again had himself a good-looking day. 210 yards, 3 touchdowns. While it came up short, Andrew Bucholtz's efforts get honorable mention. 7 Dinos with a reception in this one as they spread it out, but they couldn't spread it on. They still, though, take top spot in the Canada West.
Golden Bears and Rams kick things off in the third. Alberta up 15-7. That was until Atlee Simon scored this major from 4 yards out. Golden Bears lead cut to 1. A few minutes later, Ed, licensed to Ill Nicky, takes the pigskin and he's off. Massive gain right there, and it led to a G-Bears field goal. Late in the queue, Rams used 3 plays to get down the field where Noah Picton hits Addison Richards to cap off the drive. Game now tied at 21. Fourth Q, Jimmy Ralph under center, calls his own number and takes it to the 2-yard line. That led to an Ill Nicky major, Alberta back out in front. But the Rams would respond. Picton drops back, sees a hole, and decides it's time to go for a jog. Jukes the G-Bears defender out of his pants, and the game's tied up once again. Alberta will add a field goal to take a 3-point lead. That's when Rams went back to Simon. Who knew the Rams had a running game? That made it 35-31, and that was your final. Regina needed to win the game by at least 2 to qualify for the playoffs. Heartbreak for the G-Bears. Their season is now done, while the Rams are headed to Calgary for a playoff date with the Dinos.
UBC hosting the Huskies. 2 quarterbacks looking absolutely sharp. 2 commentators, well, they're looking on. Just kidding. Very svelte gentlemen. Julian Lynch puts the first major on the board after taking this one in from 16 yards out. It's 10 blank. Greg Bucholtz then checks into the game for the T-Birds, takes this keeper, ball pops out, it's picked up by Andrew Abs, and it would lead to this Andre Lalonde toss and catch for an easy major. Then in the dying seconds, Burko connects with Kit Hillis. This would make it 31-0 at the half. UBC loses 38-18. Best news for them, though, is now that their season is over, this red-headed guy probably won't be hanging around their sidelines too often. So the Thunderbirds' 2015 season comes to an end with a record good enough for dead last in the Canada West. They finished the year 21st in the entire 2017 league for both total points for and points per game, while Saskatchewan moves on to the postseason.
So here's a quick glance at the final standings in the C-Dub. And here's your playoff matches for the Hardy semifinals.
Some fantastic action there from the Canada West. But Ryan, I got to ask you a question because you've been banned from the Roxy for years. So how would you know what goes down with me at that club?
I hear things. I have sources.
Your sources are wrong, and you know that you've been completely banned from that place. So stay away and stop harassing the doorman. They're not going to take your money already.
Yeah, they don't like it when you try and bribe them with change.
Now you're watching Krown Countdown U. Stick around. Jim Mullen has got the 2005 Vanier Cup feature coming your way.
Here's where you can catch CIS action on your television this weekend.
The 2005 Vanier Cup featured the heavily favored Saskatchewan Huskies against the long-suffering OUA and their champion, the Laurier Golden Hawks.
The 2005 Vanier Cup wasn't just for the Vanier Cup. Wilfrid Laurier and Saskatchewan came into this one with 11-0 records. Only one team can stay perfect. Even though it's wide, Brian Devlin scores the first point for Laurier, only point in the first quarter. Huskies on the drive, 81 yards in 3 plays. David Stevens gets the longest yard. Sask up 7-1. Golden Hawks respond. Ryan Peer, quarterback for Laurier, slings it in the middle. Andy Beckler gets it across the goal line, 8-7 for Wilfrid Laurier. On to the third. Hawks on the doorstep. Peter steps back and finds his man. Nick Cameron out of the backfield. Maybe someone wants to cover him? Nah. Hawks take command, 15-7. Huskies in the third driving. Quarterback Steve Ballon looking for Daniel Stevens. Ball's almost picked off, but it squeezes through Jesse Alexander's hands. Huskies go for 2, won't make it. 15-13 Hawks. Now in the fourth, Braden Suchan hits this from 45. Huskies lead by 1, 16-15. David Stevens wants a bigger lead though. An 85-yard run to pay dirt, and the Huskies are in command with only 6 minutes left. They're up 8 points. But the Hawks don't give up. Peer on second and long, dishes to a wide open Brian Hickey, cuts the lead to 6. The Hawks going for 2, but Nick Cameron drops the wide open game-tying score. They do get the ball back on a 3rd and 17. Peer, a clutch reception by Dante Luciani, setting up the game-winning field goal. Devlin missed one to start the game. He finishes 1 for 2. The one that mattered wins Laurier the Vanier Cup in stunning fashion, 24-23. First Vanier Cup in 35 years to be decided by a single point. Ryan Peer wins the Ted Morris for MVP.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Krown Countdown U. It's time once again for the roundtable portion. We welcome back in Jim Mullen on the far side. We welcome in Gord Randall in the middle. And joining us live from California, IA, his name is Andrew Bucholtz from Yahoo Sports. Andrew, how you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
Hey, thanks for joining us. We're going to start things out with breaking news. Sean Olsen been let go by UBC, and we're going to start things out with a former player at UBC, Gord Randall.
Well, I obviously have a bit of a bias in this issue. I played for Coach Olsen. I thought that he was top class with the way he treated me all the way through. And I think that it is undeniable to say that he's left the UBC program in better shape than he found it. And I personally think that he deserves somewhat of a better fate here. What ultimately became his undoing, to me, a couple issues that we have talked about previously on the show. One being the fact that he was left without an offensive coordinator this year. Last year was one of our better years offensively, and Jamie Stoddard was acting as the offensive coordinator. He has left to pursue other professional opportunities because he wasn't being paid enough by the university and would rather be working as a high school teacher. But Coach Olson was left to be holding the OC reins himself this year. And I think that ultimately we saw that proved to be a little bit more than he could chew himself. Another thing that I think ultimately was his undoing was that he, to a certain extent, in my opinion, mismanaged the quarterback situation. And whether he had better ways of managing it or not is debatable, but what isn't debatable is the fact that that position held them back the last couple of seasons. And for a guy who was a quarterback himself, it's kind of ironic that that really contributed to his undoing. Before I pass it off to Jim and Andrew, I just want to say that even the wording of the press release here really bothers me. Okay, the UBC athletic department worded the press release in saying that Coach Olson is moving on from his coaching duties. They did not take any ownership of the situation whatsoever, to the extent that a former player that I played with messaged me asking if he got fired or if he resigned. There's no way, make no mistake here, there's no way Coach Olson resigned. He was let go by the athletic department, which took no ownership of the issue whatsoever. Couldn't even sugarcoat it by saying we've let him go or we've relieved him of his duties or anything like that. They said he's moving on. And I have a big problem with that, and it's indicative of the way the UBC athletic department is run currently.
All right, Andrew, you always have a close eye on the Canada West. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Gord hit on a big part of the problem there, is that this is an overall issue with UBC. You talk about them not having enough money to retain a good offensive coordinator this year, and that's an area where we're really seeing some of the CIS schools differentiate themselves. It's the schools that have the money to pay for good full-time coordinators and other coaches that are really making an impact. I don't think that UBC gave Coach Olson enough support. I think he did some very promising things there, especially in the 2011 season. But for sustained success, I think you need more support than he got. It's going to be interesting to see if the new guy, whoever that proves to be, can do any better, given that UBC is facing a lot of structural issues. They're not really investing a lot in their football program. There's not a lot of excitement or about that football program.
Jim.
By the way, if I'm Jacques Chapdelaine, the head coach of SFU, the first call that I make today is over to Sean Olson to bring him in as an offensive coordinator and curb the market on recruiting. That would be a brilliant move by SFU at this point in time. You know, when you take a look at the coaches that have rolled through every 4 or 5 years or so, they're all solid coaches. They're all solid football guys. Lou Delorier was just inducted into the BC Football Hall of Fame this year. Ted Gavaya is now the assistant general manager of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and has really helped rebuild the Canadian talent there. And Sean Olson is a solid guy too. So what is the problem? They keep doing the same thing over and over again. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the definition of insanity if you expect something different to happen when you keep firing coaches after these cycles. I think it was the wrong move to fire Sean Olson in this case. And really, I think this comes down on the head of the administration and the alumni. The alumni talks a good game, but they've got to roll their sleeves up here and do something about it and do the hard work that it takes to make some change to this program. If the administration has shown themselves incapable, both when it came to this latest round with the targeted sports review and the round before about toying with the NCAA, get the administration out of the way on this and get the alumni to step up and really operate this thing on its own. I think when we're taking a look at potential candidates, I know last year at some time there was contact made to Orlando Steinauer, who is a coordinator in the CFL. Craig Dickinson was the favored candidate by one of the leading members of the alumni 5 years ago when the hiring process was underway. Mark Killam, who's with the Calgary Stampeders as their special teams coordinator, he was in the running in Alberta. He would be a fine candidate. And one name that surprises me, but he's also tied to alumni that keeps coming up, and you work with him at New West Westminster is Farhan Lalji, who's a big NCAA guy who's not necessarily as keen on the 3-down variety of the game as he is on the 4-down variety of the game. That might be a big splashy hire as well.
It certainly would be a big name. I cannot speak at all for Coach Lalji, but I personally kind of doubt that he would take that position. But let's not, there's nothing set in stone. I mean, who knows how it'll play out.
Now, Gord, if you ever want social media updates on the game, don't rely on UBC. You can always find us at Krown Countdown U on Twitter. Selfish plug. That's right. Put a little sparkle in the teeth there. Andrew, we're going to go out to you. Let's talk about the rest of the country here. The top 10 is out. The latest top 10, the last top 10 for the season. It's always a little contentious. I mean, Montreal just beat Laval. However, Laval hangs on to the number 1 rank. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one this week with Laval losing, with Calgary going down. Personally, I kept Laval at the top of my ballot. I think this was a game that didn't necessarily mean a ton for them. And if you look at how this season has played out, I think they're still a more dominant team than Montreal. I really like what Montreal's been doing, though. I think I made a case for them a couple of weeks ago on this show, and I think they've really turned into a solid program and a team that maybe this year, maybe in a year to come, could knock off Laval and Quebec. So I had them at number 2. I think the really interesting divide is when you get down to about the 3, 4, 5, 6-ish level. You've got a lot of good teams in there. You've got Guelph, McMaster, the Westerns in the conversation, obviously not quite as strong. And then you've got the still unbeaten Mount Allison, and what do you do with them? I think Guelph is the best out of those teams at the moment, but Calgary's been very strong, so I put them at 4. And I think the other interesting divide is down at the bottom. Do you go with Manitoba or do you go with Ottawa? For me, it's Manitoba. I love what they've done the last few weeks, and I think they've got a chance to make some noise in the playoffs.
Gord.
For a job that is often awfully brainless at the top and putting together a top 10 in this country, it was refreshing to finally have to put some thought into 1 through 4. And I mean, there are, and you can debate how strong the arguments are, but there are arguments for putting 4 or 5 different teams number 1 this week. You could make an argument for McMaster. You could make an argument for Laval. You could make an argument for Montreal. You could make an argument for Mount Allison. Finally, it was a bit of a struggle. In the interest of full disclosure, I had Laval at number 1 because I view it somewhat like the World Golf Rankings. I was just saying to you guys off the air, where we had a couple years ago, we had Tiger Woods, who had built up such a big cushion in the World Golf Rankings that it took him years to be knocked off his perch, despite the fact he was nowhere near the best golf player in the world. And Laval has earned that amnesty, and I don't think a 4-point road loss in a relatively meaningless game for Laval really changes that. I had Montreal at number 2. I had Guelph at number 3. I think that an overtime loss to McMaster outweighs McMaster losing to Ottawa, no matter what the stakes in the game were. But I think what throws a real wrench in this process, actually, is forfeitures and meaningless games at the end of the regular season, because if you take both of those out, Calgary's undefeated, McMaster's undefeated, and then things get a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, I would say that I worried big time that Montreal was going to be number 1 in this poll. Full disclosure, I'm the guy that adds up all the numbers for the FRC CIS Top 10 poll, and the first 5 ballots that came in had Montreal number 1. I think anyone out there that votes for Montreal number 1 at this stage has some serious Laval envy going on, and I think it's more about revenge than fully thinking out about your top 10 ballot.
I noticed you didn't keep my Waterloo at number 1.
No.
I thought we were going like golf, like the lower the score, the better.
Tossed out and averaged up.
It sucks. I finally had to take Queens off number 1.
Yeah, that must have been tough for you.
Just kidding. I will say I agree with Jim on the Montreal thing, though. The point differential between Laval and Montreal in 2 games this year is still plus 23 or plus 24 for Laval. Okay, Laval is still clearly head and shoulders above Montreal. Hey, Montreal can compete with them, don't get me wrong, but they are certainly not clearly above Laval. And the other debate that I was having with Mr. Wadden last week, actually, is who's the best team in the OUA right now, and I think Bucholtz touched on it. Guelph, I think, is the best team in the OUA right now.
All right, and now we're going to touch on quick hits, but for this one, it's going to be kind of not so quick hits, things you'd like to see talked about over the next few days here at the CIS. Jim Mullen.
Well, let's talk about some of the playoff games coming up. First of all, the Loney Bowl. St. FX going into Sackville with a little bit of momentum on their hands. I don't think this is going to be as much of a cakewalk for Mount A as everybody thinks it's going to be. If you take a look at last year in the Loney Bowl, it was Mount A going to SMU with all the momentum, and I picked Mount A in that game. I still pick Mount A in this game. They're undefeated for a reason.
Gord.
I'm going to do the same shtick as last week because I got some feedback that says apparently that's my thing now. So I did the OUA games last week in that Loney Bowl, by the way. I find it ironic that we talked about when's St. FX's time coming in that conference. It could very well be as soon as Saturday. I'm going out to the Canada West, though. Calgary and Regina, I don't think it's going to be anywhere close. So my game of the week is the Manitoba Bisons traveling to Saskatoon to face off against the Huskies.
You know, these things are variable sizes.
Yeah, I've tried this one. I tried this one on off the air.
Oh, really? Okay.
And for the second week in a row, I'm going with a road dog. And for the second week in a row, I'm going to be right. It's going to be the Manitoba Bisons. Oh, man, that's tight. Taking this one on the road.
That is not your size.
I know.
You know, it's refreshing for the viewer, though. It's not quite as tight as the pants he has on for us to see down below. Okay. Andrew, out to you.
No purple head.
For me, I think the most interesting game of this week may be Western taking on Guelph. Western's a team that's been so good, so dominant, perennial OUA powerhouse. And Guelph, to me, Gord talked about, they might be the best team in the OUA right now. They're a bit of a newer team, a team that's really risen to prominence in the last few years. I think they've got an excellent chance to win this one. And if they do, I think that really establishes themselves as one of the top teams in Ontario year after year. The other game to keep an eye on, too, is Ottawa at McMaster. That should be a walkover for McMaster, but you never know. Ottawa's made a lot of progress, so that'll be interesting to keep an eye on.
His name's Andrew Bucholtz from Yahoo Sports. Thanks for joining us. For Jim Mullen, Gord Randall, Andrew Wadden, I'm Ryan Sullivan. Thanks again for tuning in, and here's your final CIS Top 10.
Number 10. Number 9. Number 8. Number 7. Number 6. Number 5. Number 4. Number 3. Number 2. And number 1. Thanks for watching Krown Countdown U. Now, let's get out to the game.